We have been looking at chapter 2 of our text, which deals with ethics and public speaking. The first two segments deal with ethics do matter and ethical usage in public speaking. Now we get to the third segment, and that is ethical informational usage. You have to become information literate because certain sources are far more credible than others. So when you are in the process of collecting information, supporting information for a speech, you want to determine whether you are reviewing materials from a credible professional source or somebody who's simply writing a story, creating a web-based commerce site, or maybe ranting in a blog. So use the acronym PARTS. PARTS, P-A-R-T-S. The P stands for point of view. And recognize that there's always a point of view or bias in anything that you read. At the same time, the information or the source might be trying to be objective, but we can't be completely objective. Is the bias or the special interest that the person is pursuing so severe that it's distorting the information? That's the question to ask. It's the degree of bias, the degree of point of view. The A in PARTS is authority, so you've got to consider the credentials of both the author, the publisher, and the author. The R in PARTS refers to reliability, and that is related to its credibility or believability of the source. Is it measuring what it says it's doing? All right. And then third, the T in PARTS is timeliness. This refers to how current the information is. The S in PARTS refers to scope, and that is the extent of your research. Make sure that your research has both breadth and depth appropriate for both the topic and the audience. So think about your audience and then decide whether you want to do an overview or you want to develop a narrow portion of your topic. Who is the information intended for? Is it too technical or is it too basic? And so always keep the audience in mind. You tailor every presentation to a specific audience. And then plagiarism. You know what plagiarism is. I won't spend too much time with it. That's using another person's words, works, deeds, without giving them due credit. And there are two types of plagiarism: intentional and unintentional. Unintentional occurs by accident when you don't know better, you don't understand what constitutes plagiarism, you come from a culture where such practices are acceptable, or you think you're crediting the source, but you're doing it in an incorrect or incomplete fashion. All right? So when you cite sources in your speech, your listeners will recognize you as more competent and knowledgeable, which increases the impact of your message in the minds of the listeners. So oral citations are significant, and we'll get to it in speeches 2 and 3. The first speech, the Whom I Really, doesn't require that, of course, but the informative and the persuasive speech, I'm going to look for source citation, oral citations. Unethical research and delivery practices, and we're going to look at first research and then delivery practices. So these are some questions you can ask yourself in terms of research. Have I used false, fabricated, misrepresented, distorted, or irrelevant evidence to support my arguments or claims? Second, have I intentionally used unsupported, misleading, or illogical reasoning? And then third, have I oversimplified complex situations into simplistic either-or, bipolar views or choices? Forgive me. That's research. Delivery, on the other hand, is will I represent myself as informed or as being an expert on a subject when I'm not? Will I deceive my audience by concealing my real purpose, self-interest, the group I represent, or my position as an advocate of a point of view? Will I distort, hide, or misrepresent the number, scope, intensity, or undesirable aspects, consequences, or effects? Will I use emotional appeals that lack a supporting basis of evidence or reasoning, or that would not be accepted if the audience had time to examine the subject themselves? Will I pretend certainty where tentativeness and degrees of probability would be more accurate? And will I advocate something in which I do not myself believe in? The fourth and last section deals with ethical listening. And so as a listener, you have as an audience member and listener, you have certain responsibilities. The first is to be aware of distractions. And this refers to all that extraneous noise in the environment. Maybe it's the speaker's mannerisms, or maybe it's some psychological noise. That's something that's going on where didn't feel well, you don't feel well, you had an argument this morning, you're thinking about what you're going to do later on. So all of those distractions certainly do affect your responsibility as a listener. When we decide the relative worth of a message and decide that it's low because we don't like the person who is speaking, or maybe the way it's being presented, then in some sense, we are not fulfilling our responsibility as a listener, as part of the audience. We ought to check our emotions, and we shouldn't be aroused or turned off by emotional appeals, and we shouldn't allow emotionally charged past experience with this topic, or even with this person who's speaking, to distract us. The key is to maintain an objective distance from both the subject and the communicator, from the message and the messenger. Think critically about the message. So eliminate the distractions, control our emotions, and now look for what the main points are. Look at what is the thesis statement? What are the main points? Do the main points support the thesis statements? What kind of supporting material has the speaker used? And how logical are his arguments? Some ethical attitudes and behaviors as a listener. Remember again that you're a key part of the communication event. You shape how things unfold by your attitudes and actions non-verbally, really. Adopting an attitude of empathy for the speaker and finding compassion for their situation and interest in their message, even if you suspect you might disagree, communicates that you are interested in dialogue and not monologue, and that you're open-minded. To that empathetic attitude, you may add supportive nonverbal behaviors like strong eye contact, nodding your head in agreement, and a smile. When our attitudes and actions purposefully or accidentally derail someone's message, we are being unethical listeners in the communication event. All right, that is the last part of chapter 2 on the ethics of communication.